thing I don't like about the modern swing, basically you stick your butt out.
Miller says Nicholas played chicken golf. That would be wonderful.
I don't think Walt's in there like John Wayne, but he probably could do it.
Johnny Miller was golf's most brutal critic, the Desert Fox, a man who brought the word choke back into golf commentary, the analyst who could dissect a swing from the broadcast booth and leave a player's confidence in ruins. He didn't sugarcoat anything, play the corporate game. He made a lot of people uncomfortable with his weaponized honesty. But here's what most people miss. When Johnny Miller actually respected a golfer, meant something. Standards were impossible. His criteria for greatness were so exacting that even major champions fell short. And only 6 players in the history of the game truly earned his admiration. 6 golfers who met a test that 99% of the tour couldn't pass. 6 names that defined what Miller believed excellence actually looked like. Miller wasn't cruel. He was obsessed with perfection. That final round 63 at Oakmont in 1973, pure contact, sound of compression. He knew what greatness looked like because he'd lived it. He spent the rest of his career searching for it in others. He understood the difference between good golf and transcendent golf, between winning tournaments and achieving something that bordered on the supernatural. His respect wasn't about politeness or professional courtesy. It's about recognizing when someone operated on a plane that most players could never reach. Let's start with Ben Hogan. If Johnny Miller had a golfing god, it was Hogan. This was foundational. Started in a basement in San Francisco, where Miller's father built a practice facility. Larry Miller wanted to manufacture a champion. The blueprint was Ben Hogan. Miller's father studied Hogan's positions: the wrist pronation, lower body stability, rotation through impact. From childhood, Miller viewed the golf swing through Hogan's lens. Swing was only correct if it matched the geometric truths Hogan had established. This wasn't just admiration from afar. This was religious devotion. Miller's entire understanding of ball striking was filtered through what Hogan had proven possible. When Miller stood over a shot, when he analyzed his own mechanics, when he thought about what separated great from good, all came back to Hogan. The hawk was the measuring stick, the ultimate authority, the final word on what a golf swing should be. As a broadcaster, Miller obsessed over Hogan's real secret, the impact position. Miller believed great iron players lower themselves into the ground. They increase knee flex. This compression allows the hands to lead the club head, de-lofting the iron and trapping the ball. That's what produced Hogan's penetrating ball flight. Miller used this to judge everyone. When modern players stood up through impact, saw a fatal flaw. When he praised Hogan, he was praising biomechanical perfection. The depth of Miller's respect survived personal rejection. As a young amateur, Miller approached Hogan at a US Open and introduced himself as the low amateur. Hogan's response was cold and terse. It would have crushed most people. But Miller separated the personality from the practitioner. Hogan's icy demeanor was part of his legendary focus. And Miller respected the isolation mastery required. During his NBC career, Miller weaponized Hogan's legacy. At the 2004 Ford Championship, watching Craig Perry's looping swing, Miller said on live television that it would make Ben Hogan puke. The comment drew criticism, but it revealed Miller's binary thinking. There was the Hogan way and everything else. Golf wasn't just about scores. It was about the integrity of the action. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this deep dive into what made Johnny Miller's standards so impossible to meet, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Who do you think had the purest swing Miller ever saw? Let me know below. Now, Byron Nelson. If Hogan was the god of mechanics, Nelson was the patron saint of consistency. Miller's respect had 2 layers. He revered Nelson's 1945 performance and felt a personal connection to Nelson's faith. No number impressed Miller more than 11. The consecutive tournaments Byron Nelson won in 1945. Miller called this unbreakable. Even during Tiger's dominance in 2000, Miller pointed to Nelson. Woods never won 11 straight. To Miller, Nelson represented incomprehensible dominance. Technically, Miller saw Nelson as the precursor to his own iron mastery. Miller studied Nelson's dip, how Nelson dropped his head through the hitting zone. Nelson sagged his knees down and toward the target. Miller argued this was essential for controlling old equipment, but also timeless. Modern players who stood up lost compression ability. Nelson's swing was efficient, repeatable, fundamentally sound. But Miller's connection to Nelson went deeper. Miller was a devout Mormon. His faith shaped his life. He saw a kindred spirit in Nelson, a man of deep faith who retired early to his ranch. Miller respected that Nelson didn't let golf consume him. Unlike Hogan, Nelson mastered the game and walked away. Nelson was gracious, humble, lethal inside the ropes. Miller often deferred to Nelson in debates about the greatest ball striker. He described watching Nelson in his 60s hit the ball dead straight every time, just 1-yard pulls and 1-yard pushes. To a precision artist like Miller, that lack of curvature was the ultimate sign of control. Nelson wasn't a relic. He was a practitioner of a lost art, hitting the ball exactly where you aim it every single time. And here's what separated Nelson from everyone else in Miller's mind. Nelson achieved his dominance during an era when equipment was unforgiving. No titanium drivers, no cavity back irons, no launch monitors to dial in your numbers. Just feel, repetition, and an iron will to be perfect. Nelson mastered golf when golf was at its hardest. That's why his 11 straight wins weren't just impressive, they were almost mythical. Then Sam Snead. Snead represented natural genius and longevity. While Miller's swing was intense work, he viewed Snead as pure inspiration. Miller's career peak was short. The Yips ended his dominance by the late 70s, so he was fascinated by Snead competing into his 60s. Miller played with Snead in the 70s, when Snead was a grandfather, and watched him outdrive players half his age. Miller admired Snead's physique elasticity, how Snead recruited power from the ground. Snead's body was perfectly tuned for swinging. Miller worked hard to maintain mechanics. Snead just flowed. One of Miller's favorite broadcasting mantras came from Snead: "Forget your opponents. Always play against par." Miller used this quote constantly to criticize players who got caught up in match play dynamics during stroke play events. He respected Snead's mental discipline to simplify the game. Snead wasn't just a country boy hitting bombs. He was a tactical genius who understood the course was the only true adversary. Miller also connected with Snead geographically. Both conquered Oakmont. Snead won the PGA Championship there in 1951. Miller won the US Open there in 1973. Miller respected anyone who could tame Oakmont. He described the greens as surfaces where a dime would slide away. Snead's success at Oakmont proved he had a complete game. Power for the fairways, touch for the greens. Miller defined respect through the sound of impact. He spoke about the mash, the noise of a compressed ball. Placed Snead in the elite fraternity of players who trapped the ball. There were players who hit it, and then there were Hogan, Nelson, and Snead, who made a different sound entirely. Miller's respect for Snead was an acknowledgement that some things can't be taught, only admired. Snead represented the ceiling of natural ability, the absolute peak of what the human body could do with a golf club when everything aligned perfectly. Miller worked obsessively to manufacture greatness. Snead was born with it flowing through his veins. Now we get to the ultimate yardstick, Jack Nicklaus. While Hogan, Nelson, and Snead were Miller's idols growing up, Nicklaus was the dragon he had to slay. Miller's respect for Nicklaus was forged in direct competition. The mid-70s, Miller briefly challenged Nicklaus for best in the world. History remembers Nicklaus versus Watson, Nicklaus versus Palmer, but for a concentrated period, Nicklaus versus Miller is the defining narrative. In 1974 and 1975, Miller ranked second in the world behind Nicklaus. They traded victories, head-to-head in majors. Miller famously said he wasn't claiming to be better than Jack Nicklaus, but right now, he was playing better. That statement captured everything. Miller had the audacity to challenge the Golden Bear at his peak, and for a brief window, he had the game to back it up. Miller respected Nicklaus because he knew how hard it was to beat him. He viewed Nicklaus as the ultimate closer. In broadcast after broadcast, Miller compared modern leads to Nicklaus leads. He reminded viewers that Jack would never bogey the last 3 holes from that position. Nicklaus became Miller's unit of measurement for his entire analytical career. One of Miller's most profound insights was the B game theory. Miller admitted that when he didn't have his A game, when his iron play wasn't razor sharp, struggled to win. He was a thoroughbred who needed perfect conditions. Nicklaus could win with his B game, his C game, even his D game. Miller marveled at Nicklaus managing his way around a course, turning a potential 75 into a 70 through sheer will, putting, and conservative strategy. When Nicklaus played well, he won. When he played badly, he finished second. When he played terribly, he finished third. This quote captured Miller's reverence. He respected the ball striking, but he respected the consistency of results even more. He viewed Nicklaus's mind as the greatest weapon in golf history. In the endless Tiger versus Jack debate, Miller frequently sided with Nicklaus. His reasoning was contextual. Miller argued Nicklaus faced a deeper, tougher field than Woods did. Nicklaus had to duel Palmer, Player, Trevino, Watson, and yes, Johnny Miller. Miller inserted himself not out of vanity, but genuine belief. He thought the golden era was golf's crucible. The quality of the adversary defined the quality of the champion, and Jack's adversaries were the strongest ever. He was the GOAT. Miller occasionally joked that Nicklaus played chicken golf, aiming away from pins, playing for the center of greens. But this was a backhanded compliment. Miller, aggressive to a fault, respected Nicklaus's discipline. Chicken golf was actually winning golf. Never beat himself. You had to take the trophy from him, like Miller did at Oakmont in 1973. Now let's talk about Lee Trevino, the peer Miller feared. In the ecosystem of Miller's respect, Trevino occupied a special slot, a contemporary who could match and maybe exceed his own ball striking. When asked to list the best ball strikers of all time, Miller placed himself on the list. He almost always placed Trevino at the very top, alongside Hogan. Miller described Trevino's impact as having a lot of mash, hitting the middle of the sweet spot every time, hitting it dead where he was looking. Miller respected the dirt-style nature of Trevino's game. Like Hogan, Trevino dug his game out of the ground in Texas. Miller, the California golden boy with the polished swing, was in awe of Trevino's homemade repeating action. He saw Trevino as a shot maker who could manipulate trajectory better than anyone. Miller wasn't easily intimidated, but Trevino had his number. Miller recounted Trevino razzing him on the practice tee during his rookie years. Miller gave it back. Trevino never bothered him again after that. This interaction was a rite of passage. Miller respected Trevino for testing him, and he believed
Trevino respected him for firing back. They formed a mutual admiration society based on the shared ability to pure a 2-iron. The 1976 Open Championship at Royal Birkdale was defining for both. Miller won some of the best golf of his life to hold off young Seve Ballesteros and Jack Nicklaus. But of all the players in the field, Trevino was the one Miller watched most closely. Trevino's control in the wind was the standard Miller aspired to. Miller later said one of the greatest pieces of advice he ever received came from Trevino. Mentorship existed beneath the rivalry. Miller loved the fade. He hit a fade. Hogan hit a fade. Trevino hit a fade. Miller dissected Trevino's open stance and strong grip on air, learning how Trevino cleared his hips to prevent the hook. Miller respected that Trevino understood his own swing perfectly. Unlike modern players relying on technology, Trevino knew his flight by feel. Miller, a feel player himself, revered this intuition. Trevino proved you didn't need a textbook swing to achieve perfection. You needed complete mastery of your own action. You needed to know every variable, every compensation, every nuance of how your body and the club worked together. That self-knowledge was rarer than any technical perfection. Finally, Tiger Woods. The most complex relationship, the six. To the public, Miller appeared to be Tiger's harshest critic. He criticized swing changes, muscle gain, and drops. But a deeper look reveals Miller held Woods in a category of respect that exceeded even his peers. Miller criticized Woods because he believed Woods was capable of perfection, and for a brief time in 2000, he saw it. Miller was unequivocal about Tiger's 2000 US Open at Pebble Beach. He called it the greatest golf ever played. Before the tournament began, Miller sensed something different. He could feel Tiger's aura. He predicted Tiger would win by a record score and run away with it. Miller respected dominance. Watching Woods win by 15 strokes at Pebble Beach, hitting spots on greens no one else could reach, was a religious experience. Miller admitted Woods in 2000 was the only player who could arguably beat the best of the 70s. Why the criticism? Miller believed Woods under Butch Harmon had achieved the holy grail of swings. When Woods began changing his swing under Hank Haney, later Sean Foley, Miller was visibly frustrated. It wasn't disrespect. It was the frustration of a perfectionist watching a genius tamper with a masterpiece. Miller respected Woods' talent so much he couldn't stand seeing it diluted by unnecessary technical changes or overtraining in the gym. He believed Woods was overdoing the weight room, a critique stemming from Miller's belief that flexibility and touch were paramount. The greatest sign of Miller's respect was Woods' exemption from the choke label. Miller applied choke to almost everyone. Mickelson, Norman, Sutton, rarely to Woods. He recognized Woods, like Nicklaus, had a mental firewall others lacked. Miller noted Woods could win without his best stuff, a trait he only ascribed to Nicklaus. Miller respected Woods' ability to grind out pars, but Tiger was hard. Tiger was old school. Tiger dug it out of the dirt. Miller respected Woods not as a but as a throwback to the Hogan-Nelson era. Before we wrap up, drop a comment below. Of these 6 legends, who do you think best embodied Johnny Miller's ideal of greatness? Was it Hogan's technical perfection, Nicklaus's mental dominance, or Tiger's sheer aura? Let me know what you think. What do these 6 golfers reveal about Johnny Miller himself? They show a man who loved golf too much to lie about it. He knew what perfect golf looked like because he'd produced it himself. That rainy Sunday at Oakmont, feeling of the club face squaring perfectly, sound of the mash, feeling of invincibility. He refused to applaud mediocrity. Served his true respect for men who could visit that same Hogan, Nelson, and Snead were the architects who showed him the way. Nicklaus and Trevino were the warriors who met him on the battlefield and proved their worth. They beat him when he was at his best. They showed him what mental toughness really meant. Tiger Woods was the final confirmation that perfection was still possible in a different era. The old standards still apply, even as the game evolved. These 6 men formed the pantheon of the Desert Fox. They were the only ones who truly dug it out of the dirt and owned their destiny. In respecting them, Miller was paying homage to the difficulty and the cruelty of the game he spent a lifetime analyzing. His voice was sharp, his standards were impossible, but his respect, that meant everything.